This footage, taken just moments before an evil and sadistic individual commits what will be the culmination of a 4-day rampage of robbery and murder, shows the moment Roy Deeley Price comes face to face with his killer. And in this video, we delve into the debauched depths of this story, covering the murderous rampage from start to finish, exploring who committed these evil crimes and what drove them to act in such a selfish, brutal and evil manner. This is the story of Carl Elysium, a vile, twisted and immoral degenerate who placed his own selfish needs above that of his multiple chosen targets, going on a 4-day rampage of terror that would end in robbery and the murder of one of his innocent victims. Hello and welcome to the Diary of Madmen and Monsters, where we talk about the mad men, women and monsters that inhabit our society, covering well-known and not so well-known cases across the UK and beyond. And if your weekends are mostly fueled by true crime and red wine, then you're in the right place and you're going to fit in well. Now, let's get ready because it's time for more true crime. Before he became one of the most dangerous men to lurk the streets of Wolverhampton, Carl Elysium was invisible, a nobody, a no-hoper, a drug-abusing degenerate who had been living a life of abuse of himself and others for years. Born around 1997, Elysium was 25 years old when he decided to go on his deplorable rampage. With no fixed address, no job, no prospects, and no record of a stable upbringing. His life consisted of drifting from one hovel to the next, leading a life of substance abuse and debauchery, thieving and robbing to make money to feed his habit, with reports that he had previously been charged for assaults, using weapons and various threats to kill. Court documents tell us he was heavily addicted to drugs and alcohol, and that his life revolved around daily missions to find the cash to pay for said addictions by any means necessary. Although there isn't much publicly known about Carl other than what I have listed here, what is painfully clear is that by May 2023, Carl Elysium had become a cruel, vindictive and evil individual who was hell-bent on inflicting as much pain and misery on his victims as he possibly could, and that his crimes were only growing in severity, culminating in a rampage so despicable the fallout for those involved would be life-altering, and for one victim in particular, life-ending. In the early hours of the 25th of May 2023, a concerned woman noticed a young man alone in St. Peter's Square, Wolverhampton. He looked lost and alone, so taking pity on him, the woman approached him, sparking up a conversation and asking if he had a spliff that they could possibly share. That young man was Carl Elysium, and confirming that he did indeed have something to smoke, he led the woman over towards some bushes, acting at this point in a friendly manner, where they enjoyed sharing a spliff, before suddenly, out of nowhere, as if turning from Jekyll to Hyde, he launched an unprovoked assault upon her, attacking and there in the bushes. After the attack, the woman, who has not been named for legal reasons, escaped from his clutches and ran for her life, flagging down help from a nearby nightclub doorman, with CCTV showing Elysium chasing the woman down and then turning on his heels and running in the opposite direction when he realizes his victim has escaped from his grasp. As he did, he can be seen wearing a striped t-shirt and what looks like no pants. By mid-morning to early afternoon on the 26th of May 2020, Elysium was once again out on the prowl around Wolverhampton when a kind local man noticed that Elysium had no shoes on and decided he wanted to try and help him, inviting him back to his home to try and furnish him with some new shoes and allow him to use the facilities. Once again, at first, Elysium acts appreciative and grateful, making out that he is happy to receive the kindness that this good man has shown him. But once more, he turns on a penny and, in a despicable show of evil, decides to threaten and rob the kind man, demanding his PIN and bank card, and then forcing the man to accompany him to a bank in Church Street, Wednesfield, where the man, who admitted fearing for his safety, handed him £180. Later that evening, Ellets would decide to target a third victim when a second woman, who believed that he was homeless and in need, approached him to see if she could help him in some way. Ellets, who pretended he had been robbed, tricked the woman into accompanying him to a secluded location, and then launched what was once again an evil and unprovoked attack, placing a cloth over her mouth and going on to force himself upon her, brutally her before she managed to push him off and escape, bravely going on to report him to a shopkeeper in the area nearby, with CCTV outside of the shop later confirming that Ellets had been in the area during the reported incident. After what seems like an unusually quiet night and day in the life of Ellets, at some point in the evening on the 27th, Ellets was once again out on the lookout for potential victims, and once he had set eyes on his prey, there would be no stopping him from taking action. As he watched a man riding a bicycle towards him, he decided to push the man from his bike, grab hold of the man's bag and drag him along the ground, ripping the bag from off his shoulder and making away with its contents, which just so happened to be £60 in cash and a wallet full of bank cards. On what was now the fourth day of violence in a row, early that morning, Ellett attempted yet another robbery in St Martin's Square, Wolverhampton, after spotting a man withdrawing cash from a cash point. Ellett approached the man from behind and, brandishing a blade, threatened to stab the man if he didn't hand over his money, thrusting the blade into his stomach with menace as he made his demands. However, the would-be victim refused to hand over his cash and, pushing Ellett away, made a quick escape, managing to flee the area and thwart Ellett's attempts to rob him. Then, on the afternoon of the 28th, with Ellett frustrated from his earlier unsuccessful attempts, he approached another man on Tettenhall Road, kicking him to the ground and thrusting a broken glass bottle at him, holding it to his neck and threatening to kill him if he did not hand over his money and night trainers, with the victim doing so, leaving the scene shaken and scared, but at least still alive. Up until this point, Ellett had made several threats to kill, but had not yet acted upon said threats. However, that was about to change, for on the night of the 28th of May 2023, he would commit a brutal and evil act, doling out a sustained and brutal beating upon his victim for nothing more than a £10 note. Roy Deeley Price was a 48-year-old brother, son and father of two, described as a man who had faced hardship, addiction and mental health issues, but had never given up hope and was trying to rebuild his life after breaking free from the chains of addiction, out of love for his children. His sister Claire called him a proud father and said that despite his demons, Roy only ever wished the best for everyone. And on the night of the 28th of May, Roy walked into a Shell garage and withdrew £10 from an ATM. That simple act would cost him his life. At approximately 9:50 p.m. on the 28th of May, Roy Deeley Price decided to visit the Shell petrol station on Tattenhall Road and withdraw £10 from the ATM, presumably to buy some cigarettes. As he stood waiting for his money to be dispensed, CCTV captured Carl Ellett's approach Rob from behind and begin to engage him in conversation. This chance meeting would set the stage for the tragic outcome just minutes later. Upon collecting the cash, Roy turned and walked away from the machine, with Ellett following closely behind. As Roy continued past the garage and onto the driveway of a nearby care home on Tattenhall Road, Ellett, who was waiting for an opportune moment, launched an ambush upon him, attacking him from behind and wrestling with him as Roy attempted to fight Elliots off. As the pair wrestled, Elliots managed to trip Roy, slamming him to the ground and grabbing him around the throat, pinning him down as Roy continued to struggle. But as he held him on the ground, Elliots began a savage assault upon him, punching and then stamping on Roy's face, head and chest repeatedly with intense force, which was described by witnesses to the crime as a ferocious and merciless onslaught. At one point during the beating, Elliots paused briefly, dragging Roy's unconscious body into nearby bushes, stealing his bank card and then walking back towards the Shell garage in an attempt to buy a sandwich, only to find out the card would not work, prompting him to return to Roy's body and begin his brutal assault once again. Across an 11-minute span of time, Elliots would pause and restart his brutal beating upon the lifeless body of Roy, kicking and stamping on Roy's head at least 12 times in total, with the brutality being so extreme that Roy's skull was fractured in multiple places. Eventually, after growing tired of doling out such a relentless amount of savage punishment, Elliots was convinced by an associate to leave the scene, and they fled, leaving Roy for dead. On the morning of the 29th of May at approximately 7 a.m, care home staff began to make their way into work. As they did, they noticed the body of a man lying in the bush of the care home garden, and approaching him, thinking it could just be someone sleeping, they realised quickly that this was not the case. Immediately upon discovering the body, the care staff called emergency services and police and paramedics attended the scene. They quickly realised that not only was this a dead body, but that the body had been dead for a while, and upon further inspection, police confirmed that it was Roy Deeley Price, with the cause of death later being confirmed as fatal head injuries caused by a vicious and brutal assault. After discovering Roy's body at the care home, West Midlands Police immediately launched a murder investigation and informed Roy's family of the harrowing news, with his sister later recounting that on that bank holiday morning they had heard news of a body being found in Wolverhampton without realising it was Roy, and within hours their world crumbled upon learning the victim was their beloved brother. Between the period of the 29th and the 30th of May, investigators worked diligently to secure CCTV footage from the petrol station and surrounding area, and by analysing the footage, identified Carl Elliots immediately as the suspect in Roy's murder, as well as connecting the dots to the other violent incidents that occurred in Wolverhampton between the 25th and the 28th of May. These crimes formed a pattern of vile and abusive behaviour, with the brazen attitude of Elliots astounding police alongside the escalating serious nature of the offences. On the 30th of May at around 1:24 p.m, police went public with their search for Carl, launching an urgent public appeal to find him, calling him a dangerous individual, issuing a photograph of him and asking the public for any information they might have regarding his whereabouts, and to dial 999 if they see him, but to refrain from approaching him if they do. Detective Inspector Damien Forrest, leading the investigation, stressed the need to find Elliots quickly and noted that officers were actively searching known areas as they believed he might be sleeping rough or hiding with friends. Incredibly soon after the public appeal went out, police would receive multiple tips that would help them locate Carl Elliots, and just one day later, he was arrested and taken into custody, with police beginning the interrogation about Roy's murder and Carl remaining tight-lipped throughout the questioning. In the days following his arrest, the police worked feverishly to gather the evidence needed to link Elliots to each and every crime across his 4-day spree, using CCTV, victim identification, and forensic evidence that linked him to every crime. And by the 2nd of June, they were ready to charge him, feeling that with all of the evidence against him, he couldn't possibly deny it. On the 3rd of June, police formally charged Elliots with the murder of Roy Deeley Price, 3 counts of 3 separate robberies and 2 assaults, including an assault with the intent to rob, with these charges covering all of the crimes committed across his 4-day spree of violence and murder. In June 2023, during his pre-trial hearing, Ellets would plead guilty to the murder of Roy and the 3 robberies and assaults, but denied the 2 women, meaning a trial would have to go ahead on those counts. In January 2024, the trial of Carl Ellets took place at Wolverhampton Crown Court, and during the trial, the 2 women who bravely testified against Ellets, going into grave detail about their attacks. The prosecution team, led by barrister Richard Barraclough, presented CCTV evidence and witness testimony that linked Ellets to the with the pattern of behaviour across the 25th to the 28th of May being laid out in front of the jury. On the 26th of January 2024, after deliberations, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts of meaning that Ellets was now formally convicted of all of the crimes he had committed across his 4-day spree of murder and violence, with Detective Inspector Damien Forrest commenting how glad they were to have the guilty verdict come back, and calling Ellets an extremely violent bully, as well as praising the incredible bravery of the victims of his crimes who testified against him during the trial. On February the 5th, 2024, at Wolverhampton Crown Court, Ellets was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 27 years, meaning that Ellets would not be eligible for parole until 2050 at a minimum, with Roy Deeley Price's sister Claire Reynolds commenting during a victim impact statement how their lives crumbled upon losing Roy. The family said Roy was a beloved son and cherished father who had been working to overcome his personal challenges. In the weeks after the sentencing, it emerged that there had been a minor error in calculating the sentence of Ellets. On the 20th of March, the trial judge amended his sentence to 28 years and 6 months to correct a mistake in credit for his guilty plea, after a review on the initial sentence showed up the error, meaning that Ellets' release date would now be pushed out further into the early 2050s. However, despite the lengthy sentence, the UK law officers reviewed the case under the unduly lenient sentence scheme, and, given the extreme violence of the entire spree, officials felt that the sentence given did not reflect the total severity of the crimes committed, and in March 2024, the Solicitor General Robert Courts, KC, referred Ellets' sentence to the Court of Appeal for reconsideration. On the 30th of April 2024, Ellets' case was heard at the Court of Appeal in London, and the judges reviewed the facts, looking at the fact that Ellets had a history of violent behaviour, that the murder was exceptionally brutal and senseless, and the victims endured humiliating, degrading attacks. The judges were particularly persuaded that the combination of crimes warranted a harsher minimum term, noting that criminality is not, in our view, reflected in the sentence passed by the judge. On the 30th of April, the Court of Appeal made its decision and increased Carl Ellets' minimum sentence from 28.5 years to 35 years, meaning they had added a further 6.5 years to his sentence, reassuring the victims of his crimes that this dangerous and deplorable criminal would not be out in the public domain again for a very long time. And that brings me to the part of the video where I look to give my deepest sympathies to the family and friends of Roy Deeley Price. May he rest in peace. And if you took something from this case, you might also like to watch the video on screen now, where I cover the horrific murder of Julie Parkman, a kind and generous woman who discovered her husband's vile secret, so he decided to murder her. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one, when it will once again be time for more true crime.